I would like to mention Joe Lauria. He is the editor-in-chief, succeeding Robert Perry of Consortium News, the oldest independent media outlet in the United States. That is as old as time issues, namely started in 1995.
Yes, we're 30 years. We're celebrating our 30th anniversary of Consortium News. Two of our columnists are sitting at this table. That would be Scott Ritter and Patrick Lawrence. What does it mean, independent, when we talk about journalism? The mainstream reporters think that they're independent. Patrick and I worked in mainstream. I may have not thought that I was being independent when working for the Wall Street Journal and the Sunday Times of London and the Johannesburg Star and the Montreal Gazette. But my colleagues thought they were. I mean, even there's a newspaper in the UK called The Independent. What are they independent from? Are they independent of government? Are they independent from corporations, their advertisers, for example? Or are they independent from the public, from the interests of the public? Journalism is supposed to be representing the interests of the public, upon whom they depend for newsstand sales, supposedly, but most of the money comes from the advertisers. I think that what the independent journalism that Patrick's talking about, that we're talking about here today, is independent from government, independent from corporate interests, independent from the think tanks and the NGOs, the governmental, non-governmental organizations. Governmental organizations funded by governments. So what are the interests of big corporate power governments in controlling and owning media? They own the media, mostly, the big media, corporate interests. They are trying to defend and further their own interests, their own power and their own wealth. That's what they're about. And that opposes the public's interest in most cases. Therefore, we who are independent media, independent from those powerful interests, should be defending the interests of our readers, the public, the vast majority of the people of various nations in the West and elsewhere who are often the victims of these powerful interests. And there's two ways that that is done, in my view, and what we strive to do at Consortium News. We look at all sides of an issue, supposed objectivity. The independent mainstream is supposed to be doing that. But I mean in a war, when your own side is in a war, do you necessarily always take everything that is said by our side to be true? And if you don't, of course you're going to be called a traitor, aren't you? Not only in war, in all international conflicts. I covered the United Nations in New York for 25 years. And to me, the United States was one actor in international dramas. One amongst many, not the one, not the only one, not the one I was supposed to report from their point of view. But of course we see the mainstream media reporting from the point of view of Western governments, basically, in all conflicts. Iran, North Korea, the Palestinians, they have no voice in Western mainstream media. So American people, European people, we don't know these people unless you go there. You don't know them because we don't hear them speak in our media. That's really dangerous to prepare to go to war against them when we don't know who we're going to be fighting and killing. And in many ways, what I'm saying is the conflict we're experiencing in the world, the major conflict between an emerging world of various poles of power against a unipower of the United States and its allies. So if the U.S. becomes just one of many responsible players in the world, we might have something resembling stability. I dare not say peace, but it's stability. What is missing from mainstream reporting, and what we strive at Consortium and other independent journalists strive to do, is provide context. Context means everything in telling a story. Historical context. You cannot understand what's happening in Gaza and Ukraine. Gaza, you must understand how Israel became a nation in 1948, that there were 700,000 people driven off their land to create this nation. You can read the diaries of Ben Gurion if you don't believe me. He says it. Or you can listen to Moshe Dayan, who in a 1956 eulogy to an Israeli who was killed by a Palestinian from Gaza said, "Don't be surprised that they hate us." We are standing on their land. We took their fathers' lands, their olive trees, their farms. And we are a settler nation who take this land with the steel helmet and the gun. They will be looking at us, and they will one day reach out to grab us with their hatred. That day was October 7th, 2023. And in Ukraine, we have to go back at least to 1947, 48, the end of the war, the establishment of the Central Intelligence Agency, the end of the alliance between the United States and the Soviet Union, and the opening of an office in New York City for a man called Mykola Lebed. Mykola Lebed was a right-hand man of Stepan Bandera. By the way, the CIA did not want to work with Stepan Bandera. It was too crazy. But the MI6 did. The MI6 worked with him, but the U.S. worked with Lebed, and they set him up in an office in New York, and they sent him many, many times up until 1991, the start of Ukrainian independence from the Soviet Union, to do sabotage operations, propaganda against Soviet Union inside Soviet Ukraine. And this shows the beginning of U.S. relationship with Nazis in Ukraine, like Lebed. And all of this is in a U.S. government-financed study, by the way. I'm not making this up. I can send the details. Anyone wants to see it. You could read the book about all of this, what I'm saying. So fast forward to 2014, the continuation, where you go to the Orange Revolution, and all of what happened up until 2014. I'm not going to go through the whole history of Ukraine, but it's important that you give the history, this is the point I'm making, in independent journalism. Coup d'etat to have U.S., again, hurt Russian interests in Ukraine and to back the Western side. And we know the history now. They provoked Russia to invade without question. Biden wanted this invasion because they thought they would win on 3 counts: ground war, but a proxy, information war, and an economic war. And they're losing all 3, especially the economic and the information war, except in the West. Nobody believes this BS. Russia did everything it can to avoid invading. They offered a treaty to NATO and the United States. You remove your troops from the forward deployments from the former Warsaw Pact nations that are now part of NATO, and take the missiles out of Romania and Poland. Create a new security architecture in Europe, which the Russians put forward a treaty in 2009, very similar to that, which was rejected. Or we take technical military measures, and that's what happened. They rejected it, Russia invaded. This is what independent media should be reporting. Thank you.